We're running out of time on this $3,000 Hooptie challenge with Sorta Stock Mopars. We basically blew our first month. We haven't done anything. So we need to get this 383 in here, get the transmission bolted to it to get things kicked off. So let's get after it. These are exhaust manifold washers to a small block Mopar. They're good because they're really thick to take up space. So we have this shoulder right here on these studs, and I got to put a big stack of screws or of washers in there so that when I tighten up the nut, it doesn't tighten down too far onto that shoulder. So put these guys on there. The torque converter is pushed all the way back into the transmission, and there's a gap between the torque converter and the flex plate. Just a word of caution, when you start to screw these in, if you start it and then you leave it loose and you think, okay, I don't want to tighten it down, I'm going to leave it loose, I'm going to turn the engine over 90 degrees to get the next bolt. You go to tighten the next bolt, by the time you get to the third bolt, this one, the converter is going to get pulled to the flex plate, and this first one is going to end up sticking out. And then when it's sticking out and you try to turn it over, it's going to hit the back of the block and it's going to stop, and you're not going to be able to turn it. So we don't want that scenario. So we want to pull the converter into the flex plate so it's completely touching, if at all possible. Okay. You can see it right here, and this is the hole. You want to put some blue Loctite on here. This is a good insurance policy because you don't want these guys backing out, because if they back out, then these things will end up coming around and hitting the back of the block and giving you a nice ticking noise, which is never fun. And if you let it go too far, they'll completely back out and cause all kinds of havoc. There we go. Now the converter's forward. And here's another issue. You don't want to tighten this down like super tight. Well, I should say, I'm going to tighten this all the way down, then I'm going to back it off a little to loosen it. The reason you don't want to leave it completely super tight is because you get to the next bolt, the flex plate and the boss may not be perfectly aligned, and then you try to get the second screw in and it won't go in. So you want to be able to leave it just a hair loose. So hopefully, if we have to move it a little, get it to align, it's okay. Now let's screw it. I'm gonna seat it down pretty far. by the way, in this spot, this is where we got our marks between the torque converter and the flex plate, so that we know we're aligned properly. So that's how I tighten these guys. I put Loctite on them, bring them down kind of snug, rotate it, and like I said before, I snug them down. I don't want them like super tight, but I want to bring it all the way down so that there's no gap between the flex plate and the torque converter. So when I turn this over, start tightening up the other bolts, that this head ends up coming out, you know? So you want it to be all the way down so it doesn't interference with anything on the block. I turn these guys, once they're all on there and kind of bottomed out, I turn them with a wrench, a box end wrench. And, you know, once I could turn the engine over, I have all the spark plugs out, by the way. Once it pulls the engine, that's how tight I make it. Then I'm going to the crank to move the next bolt over, you know, doing this to tighten it, and then move it by the crank, tighten, crank, tighten. I do a couple of rounds of that, and then it's good. Now, if you want to get a torque wrench in here, that's great, that's fine, go by the spec. That's probably what you should do, not do it the way I'm doing it. I've just always done it this way, and it's always worked out, so I'm sticking with the way I do it. You can do what you want to do.